electricity bill. China tells its flash boys to slow down. And it's a long weekend in America. But yen traders probably won't get a break, Tom.
Asian stocks are on the rise. South Korea is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. The Kospi is gaining across the benchmark, gains of 0.3%. China under pressure on that story around the flash boys of China. Some changes there. European futures pointing low by 0.3%. But with the context that you've seen gains, year to date at 4% for the benchmark in Europe and a fresh record yesterday. US futures pointing higher by 0.3%, looking to build on the modest upside that came through on Thursday. The countdown to the opening trade starts right now.
Welcome to the programme, everybody. This is the opening trade. It is Friday, the 16th of January. It's just gone 7 o'clock here in London. Let's get to our agenda, and let's start with the question of whether we need to worry more about prices than we do about jobs. You see this evidenced in the Fed conversation. You see it evidenced in the Trump administration's priorities. They're clearly putting affordability front and centre. And today's example of that is around electricity prices. Guy, you summed it up saying this is now going to become the tech sector's problem, and it is the tech sector that seems to be driving that incremental demand. And so now President Trump and governors in the northeast of America are aiming to get tech companies to fund new power installations. And this is just the latest part of the Trump administration's agenda to tackle affordability.
President Trump was very clear. He wants to make sure that we have data centers in the US, but it is not residents, it's not homeowners, and it's not small businesses that are taking the cost. We have seen that increase in prices. Bloomberg's own reporting towards the end of last year pointed to examples of residents living close to data centers in states like Virginia, where they saw increases of close to 270% on a month over a 5-year period, above prices 5 years previously, 260%. Overall, in the state of Virginia, you've seen increases in 2025 of about 7 to 8% increase. And that has been felt. People are feeling this. And so now you have this push for these utility companies and one major utility company in that northeast part of the US to put out these long-term contracts. And it's the data centers, the hyperscalers, and the tech companies that are going to be shouldering the burden.
Thinking about this two ways, one of which is those companies. Does this mean that CoreWeave is going to find it harder to make money? Does this mean that Oracle is going to find it harder to make money? Clearly, the other thing I think is interesting about this is that the Fed and President Trump are largely aligned. Inflation is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, and as a result of which we need to deal with that. They see it slightly differently, but
how far that alignment goes,
but the inflation story does seem to be a bit of an issue for both of them. The other issue is that it just highlights to me once again that China has a huge lead. China has excess electrons. America doesn't. And that's going to be a problem with the AI race. And basically, you do wonder whether this is a story that could slow down the AI story in America. Just doesn't have the electrons to be able to deliver the output that it necessarily needs. And that comes back to companies like CoreWeave. Are they going to be able to make money with higher and higher costs?
And that's where you have to, again, differentiate amongst the AI players, those who have the balance sheets and the ability to pass on margin and cost to their consumers versus those who are already heavily leveraged, like CoreWeave, and are now taking on potentially 15-year energy contracts that they'll have to commit to. You mentioned China, and there is this story, pretty interesting, and it's a reminder of the Chinese regulators and the Chinese government's determination to ensure stability everywhere, but increasingly in the financial markets as well. You've seen a run-up in the Shanghai Comp of over 20% in the last 12 months. Now the detail around potentially what we're seeing, well, we know this is going to happen. Regulators pressuring the brokers in China to remove some of their capacity in data centers sitting alongside the bourses in places like Shanghai and Shenzhen and Guangzhou, so that those high-frequency traders, they will not have that proximity, those millisecond proximity to the bourses in terms of the data flows. They want those pulled out, I think, in the next 4 weeks or so.
I think the Chinese are looking at America and going, your whole system is now geared towards financial markets. The Fed, does the Fed serve the American people, or does it serve financial markets now? Are there excesses in the financial system that pose a huge... China's just been through a crash in its housing market, probably doesn't want to have a crash in its financial system. And it's looking at America going, we're learning some lessons from what you guys are doing now.
Well, if anybody thinks they can remove boom and bust, then maybe China thinks they can have a go at trying. We'll see. But yes, this will impact retail and institutional investors, which I thought was interesting, because we perhaps think of this the Flash Boys made famous by the book, of course, and we think of this as maybe a feature of the institutional environment in the States, but it's actually a real retail thing as well, and certainly in China that is the case. So watch this, and this coming on the day that we've seen yet another high for Asian stocks.
And the volumes are epic in Asia right now, going through some of these financial markets.
South Korea, yeah.
And it's interesting as well that it's feeding through into the metals market as well. So there's a kind of you can start to see the kind of understand the connections that exist within some of this financial plumbing. So it's a long weekend in America. It's Martin Luther King Day on Monday, so that's a great opportunity if you want to intervene. If you're Japanese,
If you don't want to fight the US view of anything,
light volume, and you want to intervene. And I find it fascinating the Japanese authorities are actually quoting the deal they've done with Besant as well, and saying that was part of the deal that we make sure that the currency doesn't appreciate too much. I thought it was quite a decent. Ben Ram on the MI disagrees with me. I thought it was quite a normally intervention chat. Jawboning doesn't really deliver much of a response. I thought it did this morning, and that tells you maybe that there is a slightly higher expectation that it's possible this time around.
For how long is the question?
Yeah, because we were saying earlier in the week, I mean, it only ever does the window dressing, doesn't it? It doesn't really do the fundamentals. But the dollar up by 0.2% against the yen. So the finance minister rejecting, sort of repeating, that all options are on the table. And so then you enter this conversation, is it about intervention? Will it happen on Monday? Does Scott Bessent actually want to see the BOJ take more action? And this is something that the Japanese left out of their readout of the meeting between Bessent and their Japanese finance minister. But Bessent has been talking, back in October, he was talking about whether the government needed to give the BOJ more space to fight inflation. So you wonder what he sees as the role of the government when it comes to monetary policy setting in that context.
The BOJ expected, of course, not to move in a rapid pace, and we know that the politics is going to constrain them. That seems to be an analysis from our team in Tokyo. Until you get the elections out of the way, then really Governor Ueda is going to have to be on the sidelines in terms of that thinking around higher rates from here. But with all the fiscal stimulus that's expected and what it's doing to the yen, does it pull forward at least the market's view that the BOJ has going to have to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of upward hikes? And also what that means in terms of the rate differential with the US.
All of these things. Bessent was talking about the Korean won this week, so he's paying attention to Asian currencies.
Certainly, FX in focus. We will put FX in focus. We will also talk about the trajectory for the US economy. How enthusiastic should we be about US stocks, about global stocks? A good time of year to check in with Chris Watling, Longview Economics CEO. He was very pleased with what he saw in global equities last time we spoke to him, so we'll check in with him. Jane Foley, Rabobank FX strategy ahead. We will certainly talk to Jane about the yen and what she expects or doesn't expect for Monday, and intervention watch more generally. Patrick Armstrong will be with us, Plurinia Wealth CIO, so we'll talk there about big tech exposure and what his latest thinking is. Jessica Apotheker will be with us, Boston Consulting Group senior partner, to talk about tech from another angle.
On your day book, other things we're watching today. Prime Minister Carney is in China. We are seeing, and we've been getting details of this agreement they have been making, and we're looking at things like agriculture, of course, and energy. 2:15 p.m. UK time. Meanwhile, we're going to get some data out of the US in terms of December industrial production, so we'll be breaking that for you. And US senators in Copenhagen, of course, as conversations and the pressure from the US continues vis-a-vis Greenland. So we'll be monitoring that for you as well. And later in the day, we've heard from Fed officials already through the week, and we've been discussing the emphasis switching, it seems, from the jobs market to the inflation story. We're going to be hearing from more Fed speakers, including Bowman, Collins and Jefferson through the day.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that we heard from Daly and we heard from Paulson, both of whom had been fans of cuts in December, but now signalling a pause. So the fact that we got those who were not fans of the cuts last time around is signaling a pause, maybe less meaningful, but that does seem to be the direction of travel at the moment. Lots of people in the Fed talking about pausing, about how policy's in a good place, they're comfortable with leaving rates steady. Doesn't seem as if there's any great hurry to move towards cuts.
The claims data yesterday was really strong. Can we park the labour market concerns for a while and focus on inflation? That seems to be the shift the Fed is going through at the moment, all of these Fed speakers are talking about. The Fed's only got one hike in for this year, if you look at the dots. The market's got two. So therefore...
Cuts.
Sorry, cuts. Did I say hikes? Maybe I'm just getting a little ahead of myself.
Yes, easy to get confused
next
these
year,
days.
27.
Yeah.
Do we move towards one, and how quickly do we move towards one? The US 10s are kind of 216 right now. We've been threatening the top end of the range. Do we break through that? How quickly could we do that? I don't know, the data keeps moving. If the inflation data increasingly becomes the focus, do tends need to break out.
Yeah, 416.56. What on earth breaks us out? Maybe something at Davos, who knows?
Well, our team, well, President Trump is going to be there, isn't he, at some point, making a speech. But our team have been reporting on some anxiety in some parts of the markets in terms of the lack of volatility in the yield and how little it's been moving, the tight trading range.
The range is amazingly tight.
And that typically over a period of time, that will break out and there's potentially a sell-off on the horizon. But the commentary from the Fed officials is fascinating, and a jobs market that adjusts. 4.4% is the most recent unemployment print, and we're not seeing a huge impact from AI. In fact, wages for junior lawyers, for example, have gone up, and there's a need for more radiologists in hospitals. So the AI impact that some had foreseen on the jobs market as yet isn't really coming to bear in terms of a risk for eroding the labour market in the US.
Phew, excellent. Good.
Yeah.
We're done with that then. Don't have to worry about that now.
I think not. Okay, what else do you need to know this Friday morning? A US judge has ruled that Norway's Equinor can resume building its multi-billion-dollar wind project near New York, marking the second time this week the federal court has blocked the Trump administration from enforcing a halt when it comes to offshore wind developments. Equinor had argued it would likely have to cancel the project, which is 60% complete, and intended to supply more than 500,000 New York homes by 2027. Electricity again, front and centre. The US and Taiwan have agreed to a trade pact that would lower tariffs on goods from the self-governed island to 15% and see Taiwanese semiconductor companies increase financing for American operations by $500 billion. Under the terms of the duties on Taiwanese shipments, they would fall from the previous 20% break, putting them on par with Japan and South Korea, which struck their own deals, remember, last year. And Iran has pledged not to execute protesters after pressure from President Trump. In a post on Truth Social, Trump wrote that Iran's decision not to sentence protesters to death is good news, and he hopes that it will continue. Meanwhile, at least one US carrier group is moving into the Middle East from Asia. Fox News reporting this, citing military sources. The cable news channel also reported that other US assets are expected to be flown into the region in the coming days and weeks. Keep an eye on the oil price.
Yes. Can I just meditate on the human impact just for a moment? Because I spent a lot of my time in China.
Yeah.
And China's modern image has been seared by the massacre in Tiananmen Square, where around 3,000 people are thought to have been killed.
Yeah.
In Iran, that is the number now, a little north of 3,000 people. So President Trump has been watching this, and we're seeing now US assets moving to the Middle East. Do we need to start, on the day when oil is down, do we need to start to reassess where the Trump administration goes? We're also thinking about how other players in the Middle East have been weighing in on this.
Yeah, well, maybe oil traders thinking similarly, because oil just ticking up a little, actually, up by 0.1% or so, 63.86. Interesting that we started the year just a little north of $60 on Brent. We're now at 63.86. So even though Venezuela gave us a lot of pause for thought about where the oil price was going to go, because there were such conflicting signals in that particular drama and dynamic. But since then, the pressure has been upwards broadly. I mean, yesterday we saw a big drop because of the Iran story, but that doesn't feel as if it's gone away.
The rest of the region's clearly worried about the fact that if Iran is hit, it could strike back. The Iranian authorities feel like they've got their back against the wall. What happens next is for the oil market, feels pivotal. So much oil comes out of this region. So much of it goes through the Straits of Hormuz. This could change on a dime, and I don't know how you price it. With President Trump kind of managing the situation, I use those words carefully. Anything could happen, and it could happen really quickly. So again, going into a long weekend, what do you do? Could things change this weekend? You've got a carrier group that's moving into the region. How quickly is it on station? How quickly could it be operational? I don't know the answers to all these questions. But if energy prices start really moving around, the ripple effects into the global economy are going to be massive.
Coming up on the programme, we'll get back to the corporate agenda. Ford is reportedly in talks with China's BYD about its battery supply. We'll have the details of that. Plus, US lenders hit a trading record in a very eventful week for bank earnings stateside. We'll get some analysis, look ahead to the European bank earnings story as well. And up next, Asian markets get a boost from the tech trade. We will talk markets. If you have any questions for our guests, please do get involved. IB plus BBT Eco, that's the function to use on the Bloomberg terminal. This is Bloomberg.
know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romain Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers jobs day like Bloomberg.
Trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Only on Bloomberg.
Good morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden in London, and these are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia. We'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything. From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
It's the most fascinating time for the global economy in years, and our conversations are front and center.
We're stress testing consequential ideas, and investors around the world are scoring them in real time, helping to translate the policies from Washington into actionable ideas from Wall Street.
It's the morning call you actually want to be a part of.
Separating the signal from the noise, with some fun along the way.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back, Friday morning. 42 minutes to go until equities start trading. Cash equities start trading here in Europe. Futures are pointing us largely in a negative direction. Yesterday was an okay session. The US sold off a little bit towards the end, so I suspect what you're seeing on the screen in front of you is a little bit of pricing of that back-end sell yesterday. Asia continued to respond overnight in the TSMC story that we brought you this time yesterday, so you can kind of park that one and put it in the rearview mirror. Claims were good yesterday. I don't know what gives us the next leg. Is the rotation story good enough to get US indices higher? We're going to park that one and come back to it, I suspect, in just a moment, Tom.
It is a mixed picture on the Asian equity scene. On the benchmark, you're seeing gains of around 0.3%. It's the Scotspie is doing a lot of lifting. And then we got the story in China about authorities there pressuring some of the brokerages to remove servers dedicated to high-speed traders. That's weighing on mainland stocks and Hong Kong as well. Let's bring in Winnie Su, who's standing by in Hong Kong for more on what is ripping through the Asian markets this morning. Winnie, what stands out to you?
Yeah, exactly. Like you mentioned, Tom, we actually had a pretty decent week in Asia as we're headed for our best week since September. And like you just mentioned, it's mainly driven by these gains in the technology sectors. We're talking about the Taiwanese benchmark and the Korean benchmark, both refreshing record highs on that solid earnings from TSMC, and also tariff agreement with the U.S. between U.S. and Taiwan. Now, here for cross asset wise for the Japanese yen, finding a bit of a support here with the finance minister Satsuki Katayama warning of the yen's weakness, and also noting that agreement with the U.S. in terms of potential currency intervention. But we'll be closely watching for the Bank of Japan's rate decision next week. Now, with the board, as you just talked about, how that big news in our region is around Chinese markets, seeing how across the board it's all in the red, and that's driven by how China said that it's now clamping down on high frequency trading, and they are asking these local exchanges to remove servers of these reliance away from the data centers. Now, these traders really want to have their service as close to these data centers as possible so that they can execute trades as quickly as possible. And hence, they're seeing quite a hit on the brokerage sector because of how these traders now might have to tweak their strategies and that they will have to potentially reduce their trading frequency. Another sector that we're seeing that's taken a big hit here is the commodity sector, specifically those listed in Shanghai. We were just talking about how copper, tin, nickel, all down, and also with these metals related sectors, stocks listed onshore as well. And that's also after how the metals platform, the Shanghai Futures Exchange, is also telling their brokers that they have to remove the servers of these high frequency traders by end of next month. Back to you.
Winnie, thank you very much. Winnie Su in Hong Kong. Let's talk about where stocks are trading and bring in Chris Watling, who joins us today from, who's global economist and chief market strategist at Longview Economics. Chris, great to have you with us. Last time we saw you was December. Feels like a very long time ago, isn't actually? You talked about stocks looking like a great looking beast, which was just noteworthy.
Right.
Do you agree with yourself from December?
I do, yeah,
Still.
I do agree with myself. I haven't changed my mind over the Christmas festivities. I mean, the global macro looks terrific, and we've been talking about this idea of a global economic acceleration in 2026 that we're starting to see, I think, and the broadening in global markets is coming with that. And the Fed's cutting rates, and they've stopped doing QT, and the earnings look great, and so the basic macro backdrop looks absolutely terrific.
Okay, not too terrific though. I mean, we've started asking questions this week about whether things might overheat.
Yeah, I mean, we're a long way from overheating. I mean, you look at US bank credit, it's growing at 5%. Overheating would be 10% or 12% or something like that. I mean, we're just heading in the right direction. I mean, having said that, I mean, there is building complacency in markets. So, you know, markets go up in the long term on macro, but they trade off on complacency and exuberance in the short term. I wouldn't say we're quite there yet, but I think we're moving towards that kind of point.
Is inflation a bigger threat than the job market?
Actually, I think inflation surprises to the downside this year. So I think that's going to be it adds more to the macro case and more to the idea.
Why do you think that? A lot of people say.
Because there's no real inflation out there. We had sort of tariffs last year distorting everything. If you look at the US, rent's at 1%, house prices are priced basically at zero.
Yep.
The labour market's easing, oil prices down on 12-month. I mean,
Chris, AI is inflationary across the stack. You look at the data center build out. We've got a reminder of that today. Are you underestimating the inflationary impact of AI?
AI is inflationary across the stack. Well, that's great. I mean, it has some inflationary impacts, but I would argue we've got a deflationary productivity boom coming. Driven by AI. Yeah, I mean, I think some of the job losses are happening already, and some of the applications of AI into real businesses are extraordinary what they can do. So I think it's actually really adds to that case of disinflation, as does China. I mean, the Chinese economy is a mess. I thought it would do much better last year than it did. And we had the trade surplus in China last year. It was giant.
Yeah.
There's no imports and tons of exports.
So, and clearly we're heading towards the midterms. Last time we've also talked about how the midterms has a role on markets. And President Trump is clearly focused on affordability, isn't he? And
Yes.
so do you think that inflation is not a problem because you think he will be successful perhaps in some of his policy initiatives in limiting price gains?
Well, maybe. I mean, clearly that's his focus, absolutely. Now, I think inflation is not a problem because half the economy is not really doing anything. It's really soft and there's loads of spare capacity. But yeah, the midterms are a really important point because actually the midterms are normally a rocky year for markets. I mean, remember 2018 under Trump and 2022 was a bear market. So actually the history of midterms is quite troubling in terms of pullback. So, yeah, look, Trump's up to all sorts of stuff.
Where is the market most complacent?
Where's the market most complacent? Probably in the cyclical stuff for now. I mean, that's the stuff that's been moving.
That's rocketing at the moment.
Well, of course it does, but that's what it does.
Yeah, but that's the wrong trade, right? So I'm
not saying it's the wrong trade yet. No, I'm not saying yet. We're still overweight, long, everything's great, but it's building towards a problem. And I don't know whether it's the end of Q1 or early Q2. Well, you get a pullback and you get a refresh and a reset, and then we go again. But no, don't get me wrong. By the end of the year, equities will be higher, probably, but it's going to be rocky.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult.
Chris, do European stocks continue to outperform? The outperformance 4% year to date versus 1.4, 1.3% for the S&P 500. Does that outperformance for European equities continue?
My suspicion is it's going to flip and tech's going to outperform this year, and the US is going to outperform.
By tech, do you mean Mag 7, or do you mean different parts of the tech space?
Mag 7, tech in general, all of the above. I think the leadership's going to shift at some point. Tech's very oversold relative to the market at the moment, and it's still a source of good earnings growth, and it's still a great story. We haven't had the full bubble, and we need to price that in.
Yeah. In search of these areas of complacency, what about growth markets? You know, rates are up this morning saying you've got the hottest growth markets in This is really tight spreads.
I think that's a terrific point. They're hugely underpriced, aren't they? And if you think about the bottom half of the US economy at the moment, it's
Ariel, welcome back to my backyard once again. Today I'm gonna show you how to add a GPS on an FPV drone, and not only that, but how to install Betaflight 4.6 and activate position hold. You press a switch and the drone stays still in the air, maintaining its altitude and its position, just like a DJI one. You can remove your goggles, talk to someone, and the drone sits still. The drone I will use today is the Gepard C Vapor D5. It's my favorite 5-inch Video 4 Pro system so far because it's flying better, it's better quality.
People are very excited about, and today is going to be the day that I try them out and I introduce them to you if you would like to try them out as well. The two new features are position hold and altitude hold. That's right, these two highly demanding features are finally being added to Betaflight 4.6. I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Before we get into the video, I want to put a little disclaimer out there, and that is that Betaflight 4.6 is not released yet, and that means that it's not finished. It might have bugs, and it is probably going to change, sometimes in some significant ways, before it actually reaches full release. And that has led me to hold off making a video about this topic. In fact, usually I don't make videos about pre-release versions of Betaflight because I don't want to encourage you to get into something and then, oh, there's a bug, and then maybe it crashes your drone, or God forbid, maybe even creates a safety issue. And then number two, I don't want to make a tutorial about something and then it changes and the tutorial becomes invalid. But there's two reasons why I am breaking that rule today and making this video. And the first is that, okay, Betaflight 4.6 probably has some bugs. They're probably very, very minor. Many people are using it and not having an issue. So if you just take reasonable safety precautions and understand that what you're doing is a little bit more dangerous than just flashing good old Betaflight 4.5 that's been released, then you'll probably be okay. And the other thing is that this is just such an interesting topic, and there's so many people who want to know more about it, and I'm genuinely curious to try it out. And so I just decided today's the day, and as long as I'm going to do it, I may as well make a video for you. So let's get into it. I have to give credit where credit's due. I am working off of this tutorial in the Betaflight Wiki. The Betaflight devs put all this work into making documentation, and they should certainly get the credit for that. Some of the things have changed a little bit between when this documentation was written and now, but most of it is up to date, and it's going to be the basis of the work that we do in this video. The first thing that we have to do if we want to take advantage of these features is flash Betaflight 4.6. And since Betaflight 4.6 isn't released yet, we've got to jump through a couple of extra hoops. Now, you can flash Betaflight 4.6 from Betaflight Configurator by enabling expert mode and show release candidates, and then this menu will appear, and if we pick development, we can then choose Betaflight 4.6.0, the latest build. But there's a reason that we shouldn't do this, and the reason is that Betaflight 4.6.0 requires Betaflight Configurator 11.0. A new version of Betaflight requires a new configurator. If you flash Betaflight 4.6.0 and then try to use Configurator 10.10, which is the latest release version, it won't work. It doesn't work right. So how do you get Configurator 11.0? And it is possible to download and install Configurator 11.0, but I don't recommend that you do that. Instead, I recommend that you go to app.betaflight.com, and that is an online version of the configurator that runs in your web browser. You do need to be running certain browsers. This only works with some browsers and not others. I'm pretty sure they need to be like Chromium-based browsers or Chrome. If we go there, that is always the latest version of the configurator, which is a pre-release version. And same disclaimer applies. There could be bugs caveat, safety precautions apply, but here we've got configurator 11.0. And in fact, you can even, if you're running Chrome, you can even download this and install it as an app. I've done that runs on your computer. It's a web-based app. So first thing to do, go to app.betaflight.com and run the pre-release version of the configurator 11.0. That is mandatory. Next, we're going to go to the firmware flasher. We're going to enable expert mode. We're going to show release candidates. We're going to go to development, and we're going to choose our target. Hold on. I have to select device. Let me put the flight controller into DFU mode just by holding down the bootloader button. Now, I can't find my DFU device. There it is, STM32 bootloader. Next, we'll select our target for our flight controller, whatever matches the target that's currently on the flight controller, and we'll select Betaflight 460 Dev as the version we're going to flash. But we're not done yet. You see, Betaflight 460 doesn't come with altitude and position hold enabled by default. So if you just flash 460, you still won't have those features. We're going to go here to the build configuration, and I'm actually surprised that the OSD protocol is not selected by default. So this is an analog bird. I'll select that. You probably want to do the same. And then here in other options, we are going to select position hold, and we are going to select altitude hold. There's one more thing. If your GPS has a compass on it, and you want to use that compass, then you will also need to select magnetometers here. I don't know that for a fact, but I see the compass is a magnetometer, and it seems like if this was not, Betaflight 4.6 isn't released yet, we've got to jump through a couple of extra hoops. Now, you can flash Betaflight 4.6 from Betaflight Configurator by enabling expert mode and show release candidates, and then this menu will appear, and if we pick development, we can then choose Betaflight 460, the latest build. But there's a reason that we shouldn't do this, and the reason is that Betaflight 460 requires Betaflight Configurator 11.0. A new version of Betaflight requires a new configurator. If you flash Betaflight 460 and then try to use Configurator 1010, which is the latest release version, it won't work. It doesn't work right. So how do you get Configurator 11.0? And it is possible to download and install Configurator 11.0, but I don't recommend that you do that. Instead, I recommend that you go to app.betaflight.com, and that is an online version of the configurator that runs in your web browser. You do need to be running certain browsers. This only works with some browsers and not others. I'm pretty sure they need to be like Chromium-based browsers or Chrome. If we go there, that is always the latest version of the configurator, which is a pre-release version. And same disclaimer applies. There could be bugs, caveat, safety precautions. There, that is always the latest version of the configurator, which is a pre-release version. And same disclaimer applies. There could be bugs, caveat, safety precautions apply. But here we've got configurator 11.0. And in fact, you can even, if you're running Chrome, you can even download this and install it as an app. I've done that runs on your computer. It's a web-based app. So first thing to do, go to app.betaflight.com and run the pre-release version of the configurator 11.0. That is mandatory. Next, we're going to go to the firmware flasher. We're going to enable expert mode. We're going to show release candidates. We're going to go to development, and we're going to choose our target. Hold on. I have to select device. Let me put the flight controller into DFU mode just by holding down the bootloader button. Now, I can't find my DFU device. There it is, STM32 bootloader. Next, we'll select our target for our flight controller, whatever matches the target that's currently on the flight controller, and we'll select Betaflight 460 Dev as the version we're going to. We're going to go to the firmware flasher version as an app. I've done that runs on your computer. It's a web configurator, which is a pre-release version. And same disclaimer applies. There could be bugs, caveat, safety precautions apply. But here we've got configurator 11.0. And in fact, you can even, if you're running Chrome, you can even download this and install it as an app. I've done that runs on your computer. It's a web-based app. So first thing to do, go to app.betaflight.com and run the pre-release version of the configurator 11.0. That is mandatory. Next, we're going to go to the firmware flasher. We're going to enable expert mode. We're going to show release candidates. We're going to go to development, and we're going to choose our target. Hold on. I have to select device. Let Let me put the flight controller into DFU mode just by holding down the bootloader button. Now, I can't find my DFU device. There it is, STM32 bootloader. Next, we'll select our target for our flight controller, whatever matches the target that's currently on the flight controller, and we'll select Betaflight 460 Dev as the version we're going to flash. But we're not done yet. You see, Betaflight 460 doesn't come with altitude and position hold enabled by default. So if you just flash 460, you still won't have those features. We're going to go here to the build configuration, and I'm actually surprised that the OSD protocol is not selected by default. So this is an analog bird. I'll select that. You probably want to do the same. And then here in other options, we are going to select position hold, and we are going to select altitude hold. There's one more thing. If your GPS has a compass on it, and you want to use that compass,
readings of underlying inflation, they're going on the back of those, and therefore they're going at their own pace. I mean, you've got to remember, at the end of last year, they had to work out the impact of US tariffs on the economy. You could see that in some of the balance sheets for some of those big Japanese firms. They had to absorb the impact of tariffs. So there have been issues, there have been political issues, obviously, in Japan at the end of last year too. So they're going at their own pace, but will they be prepared to step up the pace of rate hikes? I think that's probably what Bessent wants.
What do you think would pull them off the sidelines, Jane, in terms of the BOJ, with that more hawkish stance in terms of higher rates?
Well, you know what? I mean, right now, economist surveys are suggesting that the Bank of Japan may not hike interest rates again until July, possibly April, something like that. But, people aren't confident in it until the middle of the year. I think what the market really needs to see, what economists really need to see, is stronger data. Now, we do, of course, have the spring wage talks. They have been pretty firm in the last couple of years. And it's really interesting because you do see Japanese employers groups pulling alongside both the government and the Bank of Japan to try and get these higher wages into the system. They acknowledge that higher wages means stronger consumption, means stronger profitability, and you have this virtuous cycle that the Bank of Japan have been chasing for years. And there is evidence that that is becoming a little bit more entrenched, but we need to see more firmer wages again, but also that coming through into real wages, which we're not really sure about just yet.
Jane, is the yen still a safe haven currency?
I think that's really interesting. If we look at the best performing currencies last year, the yen was virtually at the bottom of the table, apart from the US dollar. And at the top were the Swedish krona and the Swiss francs in terms of best performing G10 currencies in the year to date last year. And if you look at the Swiss franc, which of course is an established safe haven, if you look at the Swedish krona, they are countries which have really strong fiscal positions. And, I do think that what was really hurting the yen last year was the fiscal position, the fact that, the Bank of Japan aren't buying so many bonds, the fact that yields are rising, the fact that it's got so much debt, and the fact, of course, that the new Prime Minister has been associated as a fiscal dove. And I think these factors have been really crucial in undermining the yen. Now, I don't think we can totally dismiss the yen as a safe haven because there's a massive current account surplus, a massive pool of savers that will protect the yen in any sort of crisis. But certainly, I think that position has wobbled in the last year.
Jane, just the finance minister in Japan actually just speaking right now, saying the agreement with the US says that they can intervene for rapid FX moves. So keeping up the momentum of that language coming to markets, so we'll keep an eye on what's happening with the yen with that in mind. It's amazing to me that we have such low volatility in FX markets, given all the news flow that has been thrown at them. That seems to be the conclusion of what I've been reading over the last day or so around FX. Low FX vol, one of the quietest Januaries on record in terms of FX vol. How does that sit alongside the news flow?
Well, it is quite surprising, but again, it's not necessarily a new thing. If we look at some of the volatility, well, it did move higher in April, we had this crisis in the bond market, the US bond market last year, when we had, the tariff announcements in the Rose Garden, for instance. But since then, it's been sort of trending lower in a sort of a choppy sort of way. And I think the market has become accustomed to such an assault of news flow, and some of it gets pared back by the US president. It never comes to fruition, and I think the market is watching the news. For instance, watching Greenland, watching it, but not really acting unless we actually do see some sort of action on the back of a lot of the rhetoric, a lot of the threats that come through on the geopolitical front.
Yeah, some of our analysis by colleagues seems to suggest following through more often in this term than in the previous term on some of those threats. But let's park that for one moment. Looking ahead to next week, Jane, we're going to get a lot of data out of the UK. Will any of that reintroduce some volatility to the pound?
Well, it was quite interesting yesterday. We had that better than expected November GDP report, and yet certainly didn't really manage to
To use that compass, then you will also need to select magnetometers here. I don't know that for a fact, but I see the compass is a magnetometer, and it seems like if this was not selected, probably your compass wouldn't work. So I would also select that. My compass, my GPS doesn't have a compass, so I'm not going to select that. Having done all that, we then are going to load firmware and flash firmware. While that's flashing, you might be a little bit surprised to find out that Betaflight Position Hold can work without a compass or a magnetometer. And it's true that Position Hold works better if you have a magnetometer, and traditionally firmware like iNav and ArduPilot that do Position Hold as sort of part of their bread and butter have required a compass in order to do Position Hold. The reason for that is this. Let's say that I'm trying to do Position Hold, I'm trying to hold position here, and I detect from my GPS that the drone is sliding this direction. What direction should I tilt the drone in order to counteract that? Should I roll left? Should I pitch forward? Should I pitch back? Should I roll right? You might think the answer is clearly, if I'm sliding this direction, I should roll left in order to compensate. But you're assuming that the drone is facing this direction, right? If I'm facing this direction and I'm sliding this way, I'm sliding the same direction, but now the correct action is to pitch forward. So obviously, I have to know which direction I'm facing in order to correct my position hold deviation. And a compass is the sensor that tells me which direction I'm facing. So how does Betaflight do it without a compass? Well, it turns out that a lot of the time it is safe to assume that the direction you're moving is the direction that you're facing. This is especially true with surface vehicles and airplanes. Basically, an airplane doesn't really move sideways, and it certainly doesn't move backwards. If an airplane is in a crosswind, you'll get a little bit of sideways track, but for the most part, if you know which direction an airplane is moving, you can assume it's facing that direction, and that is how Betaflight treats multi-rotors. By the way, iNav also added this feature in, I think, iNav 7.00, so this is not like the Betaflight devs invented this, credit where credit's due. The takeaway from this is that Betaflight Position Hold is going to have some requirements on us. It's not just we're gonna take off and immediately position hold. There are gonna be some requirements, and it's not gonna work quite as well as if we had a compass, but it is gonna let us use this on lots of drones that don't have compasses. We'll get into that a little bit more when we actually take it out and fly it. So now that we've flashed it, let's select our flight controller and connect to our flight controller, and I'm gonna restore my previous configuration from Betaflight 4.5. And I am gonna do something risky here. I'm just gonna copy paste it in from the previous version, from 4.5 to 4.6. There is potential that some of my 4.5 configuration is incompatible with 4.6, but this isn't a video about that. It would be safer for you to just set it up from scratch, but if you know what you're doing, you can just paste it in and you can look for the errors and correct the errors. This isn't a video about that. Next thing I have to do is go to the Betaflight Modes tab, and I want to find the altitude hold and pause hold modes. And what I'm going to do, I'll add range for those. Oops. That's the wrong aux channel. I want to put it on this switch. And what let's do is let's put altitude hold in the middle position, and then pause hold is going to be the same aux channel in the high position here. That's what I want. So let me save that, and I'll just do hide unused mode so we can see it a little more clearly. What we're going to do is aux 4 is going to be no altitude, no pause hold when the switch is down. In the middle position, we will have altitude hold only, and then in the up position, we have both altitude hold and pause hold. And it is recommended, it's actually required, I suppose, that you have pause hold and alt hold activated at the same time if you're going to do pause hold. If you did pause hold without alt hold, I guess it would hold its position but not its altitude, and that's probably not what you want. Now, it should go without saying, but you need to have a GPS configured in order for this to work. It's better also if you have a barometer, but not required. If you don't know how to set up your Betaflight GPS, this isn't going to be the video where we go into it. I'm going to link you to another video I made, Betaflight 4.5 GPS Rescue. This video goes through all the steps of setting up Betaflight GPS Rescue, but at the very beginning of the video, I go into the basic steps of actually getting your GPS working. That's linked in the video description below as well. I'll put a pop out on the corner of the screen if you need to go find that video. I'm going to assume at this point that you have a working GPS, and you're going to also want in the on-screen display to have your basic GPS indicators. Now, I've got more than just the minimum requirement, but what you want is at least the number of satellites so you can know how many satellites you have locked, and you're going to want your direction home and distance home because that is going to be key to knowing that the GPS is working correctly. Next, we're going to go to the Betaflight Wiki guide on setting up position hold in Betaflight 4.6. This is documentation created by the Betaflight devs, and it's how we're going to make sure that we haven't missed any important steps. This is linked in the video description below as well if you need to refer to it. So, step 1, include altitude hold and position hold in your firmware build. Ensure your GPS is working properly. We'll do that when we get outside. We'll verify the GPS is working before we even touch this option. Ideally, include a magnetometer and verify that it's working properly. So we do not have a magnetometer, and Betaflight will let us do position hold without a magnetometer, but there's a CLI option. If we scroll down here, where is it? Here we go. Pause hold without mag. There's a CLI option we have to enable in order to tell it to let us do this without a mag. So set pause hold, there it is. Pause hold without mag equals on. And let's see, set the hover throttle value accurately. So when you first enable position hold, Betaflight doesn't quite have, it's not quite caught up to the drone to manage its altitude. And in fact, whether you're using GPS or a barometer, the altitude data can be a little bit noisy and a little bit laggy. So what you tell Betaflight what your hover throttle value is, and then when you activate position hold, it immediately jumps to that value. So hopefully the drone is neither climbing nor descending, and then the PID loop starts working and it starts maintaining its altitude by raising and lowering the throttle. But it just sort of gets it keeps it from like suddenly dropping or suddenly climbing when you activate position hold before the PID loop kind of kicks in. So it seems like these parameters have changed since the documentation was written, and this is one consequence of using pre-release features. We've got AP underscore hover throttle and thr underscore hover. And I'm not sure which of those is the correct one. Let's just do some quick Googling. What if I do get AP underscore and look at all the other AP settings to see what AP means? Yeah, and it looks like AP, to me, looks like stuff related to position hold. So I see the PID related terms for altitude and PID related terms for position, whereas I'm going to guess that throttle hover is for the throttle expo. Throttle expo also has a hover throttle value, so that's going to be for the rates. That's not what we want. So I'm going to set AP hover underscore throttle. Let's look at the current value. AP underscore hover throttle is set to 1275. My drone hovers at about 20% throttle, so that'd be 1200. That's actually pretty close to correct. Set AP hover throttle equals 1200 and save. Okay, 20%, 1200. It goes from 1000 to 2000, so 20% is 1200, 50% would be 1500, and so on. Okay, that's we need to calibrate the accelerometer because it needs to, the accelerometer is involved in holding the quad flat and level to again sort of provide the initial basis for the PID controller to hold position. So we'll just go here and calibrate accelerometer with the quadcopter flat and level on the ground. Done. And then we're ready to go outside and fly it. Before I activate these features, I want to make sure that everything is working correctly. So I am going to first make sure that I have satellites locked. I have 11 satellites locked, so I have a good GPS lock. I should also have altitude in my OSD. I don't. I overlooked that. I'm not going to run back in and do it. But it's a good idea to also just double check that altitude is giving like sane measurements. We're gonna just wing it. I'm gonna go ahead and take off. And the first thing I'll do is I'll just test angle mode and make sure it is working correctly. All right, and here comes angle mode. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. The next thing I need to do is I need to fly straight for a little while. I don't know the exact distance, but if I don't fly straight for a little while, the GPS heading indicator will not be correct, and I won't be able to use pause hold. You notice right now, my direction home arrow is not facing home. My home direction is more like right here, but it's facing straight this direction, and that is incorrect. So basically, I need to fly in a straight line, maybe further than this field. I need to fly in a straight line until it figures out what my heading is. I'm going to try and just stay over my field because I don't want anything to be crazy. Here it's working better. So I've flown in a straight line for a little while, and now the direction home arrow is pointing in the correct direction. Now we can begin to attempt to fiddle with this feature. So first, I'm going to enable altitude hold. That didn't go well. It just started descending. Let's try again. Altitude hold. No, it is not happy. Maybe I should get my altitude in the OSD after all. Maybe it is screwy. Oh, wait, my hover position isn't right at all. I see the problem. My throttle is not at 20%. It's, I had Expo on my throttle. Do you see the throttle indicator in the lower right reading 36%? Previously, when I was on Betaflight 4.5, this quad had some throttle expo on it, and that readout is showing me the actual stick position, not the throttle position that it is mapped to after expo. So I set my hover throttle to 120 to 20%, and it's actually like 36%. I gotta go change that value. That's why it's descending when I switch to altitude hold. Give me one sec. While I'm inside adjusting my flight controller configuration, can I take a second to remind you that I have a Patreon. If you value the kind of content that you're watching right now, the single best way to make sure that I am able to continue making it is to join my Patreon. Patreon is a website where you subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month. That's the minimum amount. You go to Patreon, you put your credit card in, and then you put your PayPal in, whatever, and then you get charged $2 a month. I get some of that, and I have income that I can count on. You get, well, mostly you get to feel good about supporting the work that I do here, and also you get access to my Discord server, which is a pretty awesome resource for everybody in FPV. If today is the day that you feel like I have earned your contribution, the link in the video description below takes you to my Patreon. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. And if it's not that day yet, if today's the day that you're like, oh boy, another call to action from another YouTuber who wants my money, that's okay. You already fast forwarded. Keep watching the content. I'll keep making the content, and maybe that day will come. All right, let's try that again. And this time I also have the altitude on screen. It says 291 meters. I'm going to guess that that's above sea level. I don't know. Here we go. Arm. Take off. And fly in a straight line for a little while until we get a good lock on our heading. Direction home arrow is not pointing correct. See, it's pointing directly behind me. That is not correct. We're just going to fly in a straight line until it figures out what our actual heading is, our actual orientation is. Still, oh, it's locking in. It's locking in. Here we go. There we go. Okay, it's figured it out now. Let's just double check that it's pointing correctly. Not really. I don't know if I need to fly in a straight line for longer distance than this, but I only have so much room. It's pretty close. Let's try altitude hold again. We'll get a little altitude here. There we go. Now, as I go into altitude hold, I need to be at center throttle. Oh no, I still have to steer. Oh, right. Okay, so first of all, I need to be at center throttle, and that will make it hold altitude. If I lower or raise the throttle, it'll climb or descend. So if I raise the throttle, it'll begin to slowly climb. And center throttle. The other thing is, I still need to use the right stick to steer the drone. I'm basically in angle mode with the right stick, and that is altitude hold. Now let's bring it around here, and let's try pause hold. Ready? Moment of truth. Pause hold. Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, it's really locked in. Wow, that's better than I expected. Holy crap, that's amazing. It's totally locked in. It's not going anywhere. Now, I can still...
Please eat slowly. Please eat at your own pace. I didn't know everyone would like it so much because I thought it would be a simple meal, but I didn't expect them to keep coming back and asking for more.
跑进来，然后说还要再加，还要再多加，这是一个蛮好的开始。Oh my god! Oh my god! 我想看他们的反应，但是已经没了，已经没了。放出去的时候，好吃啊，吃完了。对，他们刚刚知道我开始了，他们当时一直有在问，就是怎么做的，就是怎么样。
他们甚至自己找，
哦，
非常好奇，
哦，
对，好奇。
像那个砂锅鱼头里面的东西呢，他们也没有好奇。
就是我发现他们一直说哇，感觉很像补肾的感觉，所以就是一直自己吃，然后觉得哇，对身体很好的感觉。
哦，有吃鱼，吃那个鱼汤的话，有那种很健康的感觉。
健康的感觉，对。
太好了，太好了，耶！
对，今天我们有经验了，所以下次我们可以做更好。
对
OK，
就是要给100个小孩子。
你已经找100个小孩子了？
没有，就是我预计是100个。
你要去哪里找？
要去哪里找？真的？
对啊，
不知道，先去看看。
我以为你做这么久节目，我以为你知道你应该这些东西你
要事先联络学校，然后还要获得父母的同意，然后还要给他们吃看看，然后可能还要送检查，然后还要给他们签同意书，可能都要至少花个2-3个月。你现在要去哪里
来得及吗？
找？
我觉得
我先试试看，因为如果是先找好，我不想塞好，我希望是直接找路人，真的是完全不知道的路人。完全小孩，如果是跟他们同意是什么的，那他们的爸爸妈妈说，你一定要说好吃哦，不要老实说，你这样对哦，他们会受伤，就是妈妈爸爸会这样说嘛，所以我不想跟他们讲。
我如果准备了100份， 结果没有小朋友来的话，那到时候想说再说，我们先准备100份再说。
先准备。
我们拿出秘密武器吧。
对，秘密武器，先准备秘密武器吧。
OK.
다행이에요. 이걸 준비해가지고.
왜냐면 아까 할머니들 3-4명만 먹잖아요. 그래서 나머지는 아직 대만 음식 안 먹는
네네네.
할머니 아직 많아서 그래서 티셔츠 다행이다.
진짜 이거
타이베이
없었으면 진짜 다행이에요.
이거는 진짜台湾百年老店.
네, 매소.
그래서 제 부모님 어렸을 때부터도 자주就是在地人从小到大吃的东西，所以对台湾人来说真的很熟悉的味道，然后很最道地的味道。타이베이 리지的凤梨酥
이거는 진짜로 무조건 좋아할 수밖에 없고 가장 익숙하고 그리고 이게 타이베이 리지가 좋은 게 이 버터향이 진짜 很香.
근데 이번에 할머니한테 凤梨酥드리는 게 아니고 이번에 우리 따로 준비했어요. 양빙.
아, 타양빙은 이건 무조건 좋아하지.
그리고
우리 또 샤오예빙.
한국 사람도 자주 먹어요?
좋아해요. 와, 진짜 맛있어요. 얘가 진짜 좋은 게 뭐냐면 이게 진짜 얇게 해가지고 이 피가 엄청 겹겹겹겹 쌓여 있는 거예요. 这种味道长辈们通常是都会喜欢，因为又不甜，没那么甜，对，所以真的很适合他们。对，我们就是像萝卜糕一样，我们真的考虑了，就是
想了很久。
对。
太阳饼도 밖에 엄청 바삭바삭하고 치즈는 숲이 있고 안에는 엿 들어가요.
맞아요.
타이베이 리지는 이렇게 달지 않아요. 외국인도 쉽게 접합할 수 있는.
이게 또 너무 달면 먹기가 좀 싫을 때가 있어. 그리고 会吃腻，而且是里面真的很 Q的. 안에는 진짜 버터 향이 장난이 아니라가지고 먹잖아? 그냥 잊을 수가 없어. 이건 그냥 끝.
할머니들도 좋아하지.
이거는 난 진짜 무조건 좋아하는 거. 왜냐면 내가 한국 올 때마다 무조건 타이베이 리지를 사요. 우리 할머니 거 무조건 사.
이거는 약간 한국 약과랑 조금 비슷한 거는 한국 약과는 튀겨서 드린 건데 이거는 그냥 구워서 그래서 비슷한데 근데 방법 달라요.
다르죠. 완전히 다르지. 그래서 사실 좀 한국 사람들 조금 익숙할 수 있어요. 장베이먼들한테.
비슷한 것도 있으니까.
그래서 이게 타이베이 리지가 좋은 게 진짜 나이에 상관하지 않고 애기부터 어른들까지 다 좋아하는 브랜드라서 그래서 사랑받고 있나 봐.
그럼 지금 우리 할머니들 다 준비 계셨어요. 다 앉아서 기다리고 계셨어요.
지금
너무 귀엽다. 사고鱼头 먹을 때 그 想要吃的奶奶80-90岁的奶奶只有3个人来吃。
对，
他们说鱼头是什么？我吃饱了。对，但是呢，他们要说我们有带低奢吃台北离记的时候，
对，
现在已经做满了。
对，
我现在还担心，就是我们会不会准备不够啊？
对，我有点担心，所以我先想说，谢谢台北离记，就是给我们韩国的奶奶们
准备了这么多丰富的
好机会。对，
就是我在跟其他的品牌说，我们想要做这个把台湾美食送到韩国的这个计划的时候，他们是最快回应我们的。
对，
他们就说我要提供什么什么给你们，然后我想要给奶奶跟小朋友吃。
对，
真的感谢台北李记，我们又见面了。
진짜又见面了. 진짜 이거는 빨리 드리자. 지금 다 기다리고 계셔가지고.
就是绿豆馅，然后中间这边有一个透明的，它是麦芽糖，麦芽糖，对，它就是会比较 QQ 的，就是有那个麦芽这样子。
사진 찍고 싶어. 他想拍照，他们一直想吃，所以刚开始送给他们，然后他们也想吃。 이제 맛있게 드세요.
直接一口吃，就跟奶奶刚才一口吃下去。
입맛에 좀 맞으세요? 아 이게 워낙 건초에 하다 보니까 그게 손으로 훅 먹는 게 더 좋아요.
因为如果用叉子插下去，然后那个皮都掉了。
对啊，那太可惜了。出开手的，那吵架了。
Let's go.
시동하시래. 네. 다 찍었네. 제가 앉아도 될까요? 아, 그래요? 받으시네. 네.
아들이 데리고 왔다.
아, 아들이 데리고 왔어요? 아이고, 저는 다 드셨네.
진짜 뜯어요.
저 먹었어요. 괜찮아요. 네, 맛있게 먹었어요. 나 먹었어요. 아까 요리하면서 이렇게 몰래 먹었어. 몰래 먹었어. 이따가 많이 먹을게요. 우리 할머니들 많이 드시면 저도 배불러요. 맛있게 드셔서 너무너무 다행이에요.
예, 맛있는 거 사드려요. 잘 먹겠어요.
천천히 드세요, 천천히.
선생님, 아까 선생님도 드셨어요? 네네네. 아까 대만 그 빵도 드셨어요? 맛있네. 그래요? 하나 드실래요?
되게도 맛있네요.
안에 뭔가 있는지 알아요? 안에 녹도라고 해요. 녹도예요. 맞아요. 이렇게 달지도 않죠.
많이 안 달고 좋네요.
네. 다 드셨어. 할머니 못 드셨어요 여기. 웃잖아.
전부 다 안 되겠다. 전부 깔려가지고.
刚刚他们不是说微糖不吃，我以为是那个不要那个早点吗？糕点。
他们刚都躺在后面，然后看我们吃砂锅鱼头嘛。
对。
然后就很担心说，他们是不是就是没有办法喜欢台湾的食物？结果
他们就全部吃光了。
드려서 엄청 다 맛있게 드셨어요.
吃完了，我们都没了。
너무 감사해요. 다행이다.
对，
果然是秘密武器。
对啊，而且老师们也是想吃，刚刚偷偷问我，
没有剩的吗？
对，
这两个可不可以给我？这样。
对。我也没想到他们就能吃光。
오늘 식사 맛있게 하셨을까요? 아, 오늘 맛있게 드셔서 감사합니다.
감사합니다.
네, 항상 건강하시고.
네, 감사합니다. 맛있게 드셔서.
항상 건강하시고 새해 복 많이 받으십시오.
많이 받으세요. 수고. 네, 건강하세요. 안녕하세요. 최고.
고생하셨습니다. 辛苦了。哇，真的，没想到账号那么多。
对啊，而且昨天我觉得最难的是我们要一起分享一个厨房嘛。
对。
他们也要准备韩式，我们也要准备台
台湾的
式。
料理。
对，所以这种情况下真的我也不知道怎么过的。
而且很紧急的是，就是我们想说应该就是还有一点时间可以准备，结果他们突然就冲进来说不行，他们那个奶奶们一定要准时吃饭，因为他们都在等了，他们每天都准时，绝对不可以晚10分钟5分钟都不可以。
对。
怎么办？
虽然是一个老师说哦没关系，你们慢慢来，但是他们是为了让我们安心，但是其实其他老师们已经很急，
对，
已经很急，所以哇，他们没有生气，没有到生气的，真的很急的那种感觉。小龙一直说没关系，我们还有时间，慢慢来，就是让我们就是安心，不然我也会完全men不。
对啊，找我就对了。所以我们现在的就明天要拍什么？
我们明天是要给100个小孩，我抓的是100个。
哇！
但我也不知道几个人会来。
昨天也不是说小朋友都还没找到吗？所以今天找了吗？
我们不是要找小孩子们，而是他们要自己进来我们的餐厅吃台湾的料理，所以我们等一下要做的是要借一个餐厅。
像我这种人觉得这个我想一个一个都要准备好，但是他觉得太来不及的感觉。大家觉得怎么样？这应该不是我只有一个人会这样想。
如果当天找别人开会，当天找场地，当天甚至不是当天，隔天才找小朋友，然后当天买食材。
这就是我的日常，欢迎大家。
餐厅也没有借哦，那我们要在哪里煮？
我的现在想法是，现在先问这间老板，因为我比较熟，先问看看，然后如果不行，去找其他的。
但他们也要生养啊。
对啊，他们不用上班吗？
对啊。
先问看看，如果他们拒绝怎么办？要去找其他的，然后一个一个拜托，就不会这样。对。
你确定他们会借我们餐厅吗？
我跟他很熟啊，他可以啊。
那这不是熟不熟的问题，这是他们的生意，然后完全你要欠他们什么东西这个。
而且我也没看过他们的厨房，如果不适合做料理怎么办？我有看过。
对啊。
你看过？你什么时候看过？由于我常客啊，我来证明，我真的跟这边老板真的很熟。 사장님, 혹시 제가 부탁 하나만 해도 될까요? 제가 이제 좀 좋은 취지로 이제 대만 음식을 한국 아이들한테 주려고 하는데 식당을 아직 못 구했거든요. 혹시 내일 영업 시간이 어떻게 되시죠?
저희는 오픈이 11시 반부터.
11시 반.
오픈이 오전 11시 반?
네.
잠깐만, 원래 오후 아니었나요?
오전 11시 반. 오후 늦게까지.
그러면 내일 혹시 내일 완전 평일이잖아요. 내일 쉬는 날 아니신가요?
아니에요.
그러면 혹시 내일 점심에 주방을 같이 써야 되나? 그 점심에 혹시 여기 잠깐 이렇게 저한테 조금 살짝 빌려줄 수 있을까요?
잠시만요. 예약 맞죠?
네.
와.
예약을 보신다 하잖아요. 당연히 이제 또 그만큼의 이제 비용도 챙겨드리고 사장님도 장사해야 되는데
어느 정도?
아마 한 애들이 올 거라서 아직 몇 명 올지는 몰라요 손님이. 근데 한 3시간 정도?
네, 가능합니다.
진짜요? 와.
엄청 단골이시거든요.
엄청 단골이. 그 정도로 단골이었어요.
저희 가게를 많이 좋아해요.
와.
한 그럼 2시간 정도만. 근데 이제 아침 일찍 11시부터 반부터 원래는 하시니까 이제 아침 일찍 와서 제가 좀 이렇게 재료 준비도 하고 그리고 실제 영업시간 그렇게 길지는 않을 거예요.
네, 알겠습니다.
네, 무조건 그 안에 끝내는 걸로 저녁 장사하시기 전에.
감사합니다. 감사합니다.
다행이다.
아유, 감사합니다.
감사합니다. 캣째, 어서 와.
但我发现这里好像在山上。
对啊，你看外面全部都只有树跟山，还有车子。
对啊。
对。
然后你刚才说你希望小朋友会走进来，但是
外面根本没有小朋友。
对啊，这附近有小学，要不要先去看？
小学。有是有，但是有点有距离啊。对啊，有点有距离。
那不然呢，我们可以去看看。
那怎么办？现在已经有厨房了，但是没有小朋友，那怎么办？然后这个问题也太晚想了吧？
对啊。
我是以找到餐厅为主嘛。对，没想到小朋友们。小朋友。这边比较难来。
反正我觉得，那我们去看看小学附近，然后看看那个地方，我们可以看看小孩，要不要？
然后把他们绑架过来。绑架过来，我觉得会完蛋哦，完蛋会出事哦。
那反正我们3个人在一起，我觉得我们肯定会成功，
总会有办法的，
总会有办法。所以我们吃完这个去看看小学附近好了。
好，先吃再说，先吃。好，干杯！
辛苦了。
谢谢。那我觉得菜单要不要改一下？我们原本盐酥鸡跟外面。但是盐酥鸡不错啊，也是不错，但还是做
鸡排。
对，鸡排。为什么？
因为昨天我发现奶奶们其实蛮喜欢萝卜糕，然后我觉得这次我们的目标是小孩子，所以我觉得我们可以挑战一下，然后鸡排应该是小孩们觉得蛮有想。
对，很大嘛。我觉得这样讲好像对，因为韩国的炸鸡也都是小块一块一块的，对，跟盐酥鸡差不多，这样一大片的炸鸡。
我没有看过，
好像有的话也就是半只整只鸡翅炸，不会这样一整片的鸡胸肉。
就我们没有那种。
跟台湾是不一样，台湾的会这么大嘛，所以小孩子们看到我以为这是什么？想要给他们一个冲击的感觉。对，哇，这比我的脸很大哎。
对。
鸡改鸡排也是可以啊，只是如果改鸡排的话，我就要提早先腌才会入味。
哦，
至少要3-4个小时。
3-4个小时。
鸡排再久一点，比鸡块再久一点。
OK。
这样。
然后那个一晚上，我们要不要加一下那个香菜？
嘿，
我也觉得
韩国人不是都不吃香菜吗？对，但是昨天那个，因为你是昨天在厨房没看到老师们的反应，但是我们2个都有看到了，他们突然说，哦，我也要加香菜，我也要，真的很多人就想加香菜，一直加。因为原本是第一开始一个老师他说我完全不要香菜，那他说后来就说哦我要香，他一直很尴尬的脸就说啊我要香菜这样，然后自己加不吃了。那我们不要告诉他们是香菜，我们吃了，还是不要讲，
不要讲好了。
因为其实不讲他们也可能没发现。我觉得香菜是好吃的，但是韩国人的印象中还没吃过就觉得好像很不好吃，有刻板印象，对不对？哦，那牛肉面的话就直接牛肉面吗？
牛肉面也可以改良一下，觉得比如说加牛肚。
牛肚，因为我原本是想说就用比较常见的，就是台湾是用牛腩或者是牛腱子的部分，就是有一点那叫什么，有点筋的部分，就是原本是想说用这2个部位去做。那牛肚的话，我是怕韩国人，你们会吃牛肚吗？我还是小朋友不太会习惯。
因为韩国也有那种米肠嘛，就순대，所以我觉得小朋友们也可以接受那些东西，然后放一下牛肚，我觉得比较更台湾一点嘛，台湾味道一点，所以趁这个机会我们给他们试看看台湾的味道。但是我不知道找不找得到，市场里面不知道有没有。那现在都吃完了吧？我们看到赶快去市场，因为我还要买很多的鸡胸肉，然后还要买牛，然后还要找牛肚。OK，赶快去吧，不然明天就没有得吃了。好的，吃完哦。OK， 走吧，我们走吧。哇，好冷哦。哦，对啊。好，那你已经准备好了我们要买什么吗？有，现在都准备在这里了。哦，而且是要买的蛮多的，所以赶快。OK。大家帮我买这些，然后我找这些。好。你没有打算我怎么知道？开玩笑。혹시 소 위나 이렇게 좀 내장 부분도 팔아요?
그런 거는
없어요. 그럼 뭐 특수 부위 파는 데를 가야 돼요?
네, 그냥 그거는 바로바로 잡아서 그런 게 먹을 수 있는 거지. 이렇게 못 먹을 수 있는.
여기는 좀.
果然没有牛肚。
알겠습니다. 감사합니다.
果然没有牛肚哎。
没有。
我等下再去市场看看吗？先买可以买的好了。
好。여지만 있어도 힘줄? 아까 들어보니까 특수 부위나 바로 해가지고 한 대밖에 없대요.
然后。
那我们还不确定我们要买多少，因为我们没东西放。
快100位小朋友吗？对啊，买完之后放哪里？
对啊，我们要看。
那买完了，等下没地方冰又会坏掉啊。朱迪应该会自己想办法吧？
对啊，朱迪到底在干嘛？
反正朱迪是在地人嘛，这里是他的地盘，我想应该他自己可以想办法解决。我先买材料吧，反正明天都要用。
那我们先买吧。
什么？승우 뭐예요?
이러고 있지.
근데 지금 대만 애들 그 대만 애들이 아니고 그 대만 요리를 지금 한국 애기들한테 해주려고 하는 초등학생들한테 지금 식당을 못 구해가지고 그 아는 식당을 빨리 좀 못 구해줘요. 저 지금 재료랑 다 사고 지금 뭐 할지 다 생각하고 지금 다 해놨는데 지금 슈퍼인이랑 문제인데
식당이 필요한 거야? 그 음식점이 필요한 거야?
식당 둘 다 식당이랑 음식점 똑같은 거 아니에요?
마라탕집 가면 안 돼?
마라탕집을 왜 가? 아니 내가 요리할 수 있는 공간이 필요해요. 아니 내가 해줘야 되는 거야 요리를. 마라탕 음식을 먹이는 게 아니고 애들한테.
아빠 집에 가면 되지.
아빠 집이 어디야?
대만에?
아니 대만 아니야 이거 대구에서.
집에서 해 집에서.
아니 끊을게. 오케이. 아이 도움이 안 되네. 잠깐만. 我来到了小学，但重点是要接餐厅。이모 뭐냐 그 대만 음식 초등학생들 하려 하는데 식당 좀 빌려줘 있어. 식당.
물어봐야 되는데.
누구한테요?
그 식당 주인한테 물어봐야지.
이거 좀
보여주시면 안 돼요?
뭐 이야기해 볼게요.
내일.
내일?
응.
알겠습니다.
내일 아침에. 그리고 초등학교 근처여야 돼요. 내일
공포가 뭐라.
내일 아침. 아는 사람 많잖아요. 아니 대구에 50평생 살았으면 그 정도 아는 사람이 없으면은 이제 조금 인생을 잘못 산 것 같은데. 아니 끊을게 빨리 보여주세요. 딴 데도 전화가려가지고.
네, 알겠습니다.
네. 다들 적극적이지가 않네. 아니 내가 명절 때 조카들 용돈도 그렇게 많이 주고 명절 때 내가 맛있는 것도 다 사고 어른들 용돈도 가끔 드리고 했는데 이 정도는 빨리 해결해줘야지. 이모부.
그래 규리야.
그 대만 음식 초등학생들한테 해주려고 하는데 초등학교 근처에 있는 음식점도 하나 보여줄 수 있어요 내일?
그래줄 수 있지.
내일 오전에.
가능해.
진짜요?
가능해.
아는 곳 있어요?
아는 곳 뭐 만들어야지. 어디로 보여줄까?
초등학교 근처에 다 돼요. 애기들이 올 수 있는데 초등학생들.
알았어.
메뉴는 우육면이랑 그 어묵탕이랑 그리고 찌파이.
그런 걸 만들 수 있는 매장이면 돼?
아니 제가 만들 거예요. 거기는 못 만들죠. 그 주방을 구해야 돼요. 주방이랑 이제 식당을.
알겠어. 주방을 쓸 수 있는 곳을 구하면 되잖아.
네.
몇 시간 정도 써야 돼?
음식 준비 시간 한 3시간, 애기들 보면 한 5시간?
알았어. 그냥 뭐 한 반나절 쓸 수 있는 걸로 알아볼게.
네, 비용은 제가 다 어떻게 할 테니까 부탁드릴게요.
알겠어.
네.
바로 연락 줄게.
네네네, 연락 주세요. 네. 역시 뭐고 바로 된다 하잖아. 이게 안 된다는 게 없어. 나랑 똑같아. 무조건 된다 생각하고 딱 하는 거. 可以即使我的一户户也不知道可不可以，但是他会先说可以，他从来没有说过好像不行，不可以，他一定说可以，对，但这个他是可以的。对，我也是跟他学的，对我也是觉得明天已经可以。
没想到随便买一买，然后还是买了一车。
对啊，哇！但肉，
对，牛肉竟然没有怎么会这样？
当然这些东西我们等一下再去买好了。我先装进去。
去那个卖牛肉的专卖店买吗？
对。
那边有吗？
那边肯定有。但这些东西我们到底要放哪里啊？
其实这些冰起来就好了，有一些菜的话放在外面其实也不会坏掉。
OK。
走吧。
我找餐厅了。
你找了吗？
找到了。
什么意思？
我说很简单。
真的假的？
这里是我的地方。
哇！
果然是大邱女神。
就一个电话就可以解决了。对啊。
真的好厉害耶！
就不用在大邱不用担心，就是可以相信我。
果然是大邱女神。
你确定？如果是明天，然后有餐厅愿意接你，
明天就中午可以接我们，早上可以接我们，就是半天。
应该是因为乡下比较有人情味，所以才有可能。
什么意思？
没事，走了。
真的。
我要买牛肉，哥哥。
OK， 是这一家吗？
对，是这一家。
哇，
不错吧？
不错哎，好大哎。
也是很大，然后也可以借很多小孩子们。
整间都可以借我们吗？
对啊，厨房也可以借。
厨房蛮大的耶，你怎么有办法在2个小时内借到这么大的餐厅啊？
对哦，
在大邱啊，我什么事情都可以做，没有我做不到的。
好像是 C 的，那我们进去看看吧。
走吧。
OK， 进去才知道。
哇，吃得很好。
哇。
안녕하세요.
谢谢。안녕하세요.
감사합니다. 빌려주셔서.
아유, 감사합니다. 감사합니다. 首先我也喜欢 Judy， 然后听完他已经把餐厅都借好了，就觉得真的不能相信，应该是他的家人或之类的，但是发现不是家人，然后他真的进去餐厅，然后去问，觉得哇我现在是先看 Judy， 我就觉得他的运气也很好，应该他有努力，但是我觉得他的运气也很不错。 可以找到这些很大的餐厅，然后
太爽了吧？
对吧？
哇，
这不该借，
对啊，
也可以借100个客人。
对啊，现在问题是 OK， 那我们餐厅解决了，但我们要怎么行销？
对啊，小朋友怎么办？
对啊，
我要怎么吸引小朋友来到这边吃我们的台湾料理？
我觉得可以刷子，
印海报，
印海报，对不对？印海报，对。
我们说印海报这个天气哦。
我觉得可以，因为小孩子他们一定会下课嘛。
对，你说小朋友下课然后看到海报就会想要进来吃吗？
对啊。
哦，海报，啊，那你海报设计了吗？
我可以啊，你给我5分钟，对的，你给我5分钟我就可以做。
那印呢？
印也是没问题啊，这里是到处啊，没问题。
那明天的那个广告部分、行销部分就交给
好，反正我们行销公司嘛。
哦，是。
我们行销公司，没问题啊，没问题。
因为我明天要准备很多料理，所以我没有办法帮你。你一个人没关系吗？
没关系，就一直打球好不好？
因为我们已经准备了100份了嘛。如果我们明天就是没有人来的话，那这些全部准备好的东西都要丢掉这样我也吃不了那么多啊。
因为这边附近都是补习班，我们去所有的补习班，然后跟他们说，我们可以提供免费的台湾料理。然后我们就贴海报，
他们就会来了吗？
对，我是这么觉得。
我已经有跟你提过，因为我明天一大早就要开始准备料理，所以行销的部分我们交给你。
好，没问题。
好，
没问题。
那我们就靠 Judy 了。
哇，那如果他说这个是什么？看起来不好吃，我出去了，那你怎么办？
这种心态不行。
他们绝对会喜欢。
我是觉得会喜欢了。
如果小朋友不喜欢，你会剪掉吗？
我不会，我直接会放进去。
但台湾人都要受伤
反正我也是去台湾，也会有不习惯的食物嘛，所以我觉得还好啦。他们不习惯的关系，就是才会说不好是这样的，但是他们习惯了一定会喜欢。因为我个人觉得，人呢喜欢假的，就是已经包装过的，因为包装过的比较舒服嘛。哇，他们很喜欢果然是很舒服嘛，不会很受伤。但是如果是我们直接拍下来，然后给观众们看，我是比较喜欢真实的，所以我也相信也会有像我这样的比较喜欢真实的人。如果有人说不好吃，我不想吃，我这种方面也是全部会拍进去，然后会上传到 YouTube 的。这就是调查冰单的精神。新旧叉叉给我真的会新旧叉叉。
也太突然了吧？
太突然了。
OK， 果然是我们老板
真的会经济的，像经济就那样子，
大抽地头蛇。
对，新旧叉叉给我。
OK， 全部剪进去。
那我们进去厨房看看吧。
好。
明天的战场。
对啊，明天的战场。
OK，
好，
新旧叉叉给
哇，太好了！这边有很多个炉子。哇，这个好，这个炸东西。哦耶，对，我就说这个。
有。
那有盐巴跟
盐巴
糖吗？
一定有。我带回家。
好，那油呢？
带回来。
有，因为明天要炸东西，所以可能要用蛮多油的。
就前面有超市，在那边买就 OK。好，就这里位置真的很好
对啊，那这里有压力锅吗？因为牛肉的话用压力锅，不然要炖很久
我问一下，혹시압력밥솥있을까요？
우와!
Oh my god!
天哪！
아니요, 괜찮아요.
우와!
감사합니다.
太棒了！
다 있어요?
全部
都有吗？
那这样都有了。
OK， 那明天就
带材料过来，我们就可以开始。
我说相信我吗？
是，你确定他们会来吗？
确定刚刚快要下课的时间。
我们东西都准备好了，然后只有客人，我们需要的是客人哇，嗨。
For the most part, people don't understand drones. So when they do, they're comfortable with it. When they don't, they want to see it burn. And then when you go out and see it in real life, it's like, well, that's freaking cool as crap.
You remember that scene in Star Wars with the speeder bikes? Everybody watched that scene and you wanted to be on the speeder bikes. Flying FPV, that's the closest analogy to what that's like.
So you might have seen drone footage before, but you probably haven't seen drone footage like this. So, if you're prone to motion sickness, you might want to grab a barf bag, because it's about to get wild.